Askawikwasinumis Nitampuag, Kanupiam, Natasuis Crystal Baker, Education Coordinator of the Tamaquag Museum. And it is my pleasure to welcome you this afternoon to the 6th presentation in our year-long Culture Bearer series. Throughout this series, we are introducing you to Indigenous educators who have been vital to the work of sharing and preserving cultural knowledge. This series was made possible thanks to the funding from the Rhode Island State Council on the Arts, the Pepito Opportunity Connection, the New England Foundation for the Arts, the Rhode Island Council for the Humanities, Rhode Island Charge, other anonymous funders, and many community donors. If you too would like to support programs like this one or other Tamaquag educational endeavors, please visit our website at tamaquagmuseum.org. And please know that we appreciate your support. A few housekeeping tips. Please make sure that you are on mute in order to avoid background noises. However, you may engage throughout the presentation by using the chat box to type in your thoughts and use your reaction buttons to let us see your enthusiasm. We will also have time to take a few questions at the end of the presentation. If you encounter any technical trouble, please use the chat box to private message Tamaquag Tech for assistance. And now it is my honor to introduce you to Ramona Peters as this month's Culture Bearer. Ramona's traditional name is Nosapaket, and she is a member of the Mashpee Wampanoag Tribal Nation. She is an internationally renowned educator, published author, and Indigenous activist, supporting tribal communities all across Turtle Island. As a community organizer, she has brought tribal communities together for cultural sharing, historical preservation, repatriation efforts, and conservation advocacy. Ramona Peters holds a bachelor's degree from the University of Arizona in elementary education and a master's degree in applied human and community development from the California School of Professional Psychology. This is just a highlight of her years of work and dedicated service to her culture, community, and others. So please join me in welcoming today's guest, Ramona Peters.
Well, hello everyone. Thank you, Crystal. I think she mentioned that I was from Mashpee. I'm a Wampanoag, and my family is Bear Clan. And I am in Mashpee right now at my living room / studio. So welcome to my place. I'm working on a piece, so while I'm speaking, if I look down, it's only because there's a wet piece of clay in front of me, and it may take a little attention, a little water every once in a while, just to keep it in progress. So I've been doing pottery for about, I tried to calculate it, but I think it's about 35, 40 years, 35 somewhere. But it's not about the time so much as the feel of it. Working with the earth directly is an honor and a privilege. To have the earth actually speak to me through my hands it's an awesome experience, and maybe some of you have also had that experience. I love doing it. I didn't always, though. I actually did not realize that clay should be a part of my life until like about 35 years ago. Someone asked me to make a piece, and in the process of making it, an entire shift took place in my body, and it was just what I needed at that point in my life, and ever since. So clay, the earth, and so I've learned a lot about it, and I've learned a lot about our ancestors as well through the earth directly. I think all Indigenous people realize that the DNA of their ancestors is in the earth, wherever they live, and it tends to seep out and through the land. I was able to look at some pieces of pottery that were broken, found through archaeology and accidental discovery by people in the neighborhood or wherever. These pieces of pottery would show up every once in a while, especially after it rains. They sort of percolate up a little bit. And so there were pieces found, and I used those to figure out how to make impressions on the clay. And some of it was dragging. Some tools were, and I've made a bunch of tools, and I'm going to try and get some of them closer to the camera for you. But so some, just for demonstration, some are actually dragged across the clay to make lines or curvy. Some are used to, now this is a tool that is used to rock on the clay, and so these will leave a series of dots, this particular one. Well, geez, I have a number of them. I'm not going to go through all of them because there's many, and because I got inspired by the idea of some of the pieces I found, the shirts, the impressions were impossible to duplicate without making these tools. And so I found out that certain woods really work well with the clay. There was a time in my life that I worked in a boatyard, and so I had access to a lot of exotic woods, which I did try some, and from different parts of the world. And so I was lucky there. Some wood actually takes a carve better than others. I use antler from deer and also bone. This also works well with clay. There's a fellow in the tribe that made me a few nice pieces that I could use to sketch easily onto the clay. I use whalebone, one of my favorite tools for smoothing, and especially around the base of the piece. It needs a lot of connection. You're always connecting the rows. These are coil constructed pots, and so there's one coil on top of another, and they need to have a memory, a collective memory between them in order for them to survive heating and cooling and staying together. So smoothing, and sometimes I sing to them because the tapping on them with paddles also sends a vibration that also connects them. So I've made a bunch of paddles too. This one, you might see, it was a kitchen tool, and I carved some star prints through the holes, and it also has an edge so I can rock the design onto the piece as well. And on the other side, there's another type of star, like a shooting star pattern in there. Most ancient type of paddle is the coil wrapped paddle, and these this hemp, you can soak it in the water. It's a mahogany stick, so mahogany seems to love water. And so the two combined together leave a very old style pattern that you can shift it so it doesn't look like just lines, but also hatching. This paddle, you can see, is sort of carved so that it can, I got carried away with this one. This one has teeth that go up like this in rows. And when I paddle the piece, I can pull clay up. Sometimes the shape, it depends on the clay too. Some of the clays are easier to work with meaning some of them are really love to be shaped and others need a little bit more attention to get them into balance. And so this paddle is really a persuader. I want to just show you if I can get it close enough so you can see. It broke once, and so I had to make like a Dutchman, what they call from the boat, this technique of mending wood splits. So there's that. My grandchildren are here, and they've been here for a month, and I'm so happy. It was so much fun. And one of them, Evan, made some impressions from my tools on a piece of clay, and I'm just going to show you close up to the number of different types of patterns that some of my tools can make. So that is fun. I will fire that for him when I finish this piece I'm working on here. So I actually have some slides of some pottery that I've done in the past. So I'm going to try and share that with you right now. I'm believing that it's there on the screen. Yes, okay. So this is one of my earlier pieces. And I kept this in the family, actually. You might even be able to see it in the background over there in the corner. It's very thin and delicate in a way, but it's huge. A couple gallons maybe could fit in there. These are cooking pots, old-time cooking pots, and most of them, that's what I really like to make is the cooking pot. It means a lot about communal lifestyle and oh gosh, there's a lot to share about this. So I'm just going to try and scroll through. As you can see, I really like to carve on the pots as well as leave impressions. And so sometimes they take a lot of different forms, and we didn't use a lot of color, or glazes, if you would. But black, red ochre, and sometimes I mix white clay into, or I actually do inlaid white clay. This piece I called Ancient Lately, and I totally got carried away with this piece. I even started to make impressions and carvings on the inside of it. You can see inside the rim there. And the sizes are hard to imagine. That piece stands about 20 inches tall. And, I don't know, maybe 12 or so wide, a foot wide. This is what an older form, an earlier piece. We call these clay sacks, but this one doesn't really look like a sack. And I was a perfectionist back in those days. Didn't realize that we are not perfect and we should accept that. I got really carried away about making very straight sides. And it was fun, and it was an accomplishment. So there it is. I call this the Oreo pod, sort of reminiscent of the bird's nest Oreos. This one is inspired by the Southwest, actually. One of my schoolmates when I was at the University of Arizona, her grandmother was from San Ildefonso, and I got to visit Pueblo people. And even though it's our northeastern style shape, the colors are very much reminiscent of the Southwest. This is a whale oil pot. Now we used whale oil for a lot of things. And so this clay comes from next town over, or in Barnstable, a couple towns down. And the clay is very red. They used to have a brick making factory over there. There was a huge deposit of this kind of clay there. Not a lot now, but you can see there's thousands and millions of bricks all over the place, and it comes from the earth directly. This is another whale-inspired piece. Living on Cape Cod and Cape Cod Bay, we have the whales visit us every year, and they're in the bay right now. The grandchildren went out yesterday, the day before yesterday, in a whale watch, and we saw 4 of them, humpbacks. These are vertebrae, whale vertebrae. I call this the Vineyard Sound piece. This is white clay and inlaid. My friend Berta Welch over in the vineyard, she's a critter. She did the wampum inlay for me. It was a collaborative piece, and we put it in an exhibit over at Mashantucket Pequot. Actually won a prize for that piece. It's very small, but very sweet. This one is called the Legend of Mashpee Pond. This piece is in the museum. Pequot Museum purchased this piece. It's quite large. A lot of people are angry with me because I let it go. There's a story behind it, and I don't know that I have enough time to talk about that, so I'm just going to move along. This is a canteen. I call them Water Buddies. It's a series. The series I, made 3 of them. And this was the first one. And so it's a canteen with a strap on it. You can't see the back of it, but it has like some loops to hold the strap and some glyphs of our local relatives. And so I got into then. This is almost, it's very similar to a pot that we found in archaeology, and it is a, owl pot. Yeah, this one is one of my favorites. I do not remember where it went to. And none of these did I keep for myself, except for the first one you saw. Another bird pot. I called it like Bird in the Apron. There was a moment in my time where I did a course at the Radcliffe ceramics over in Harvard, whatever. Anyway, you'll see some of those pictures of that class, but in that school, in that ceramic center, they have kilns of all types. And so I got to do some of these types of firing techniques that I would not be able to do at home. It's great fun. Another relative piece. These are lap bowls. I made a series of lap bowls that we would have, had. This is a very, very large piece as well. I would say 3 gallons of liquid or food could be in there. Another clay sack. And so this powdery color comes from whatever's in the water. It comes through the clay when it's fired. You can't see the whole piece. I didn't save a picture of this whole piece for some reason, but Cape Cod pot. The pots along the coastline were more rounded on the heads than they were in the bodies. The inland, they start to get squarish up top. It's an example of inlaid white clay, this piece here, the rim, and pipes. I made some clay pipes as well. So lots and lots of work through the years, but that's a taste of some of the things we've been doing. And these are now some pieces that were found in archaeology, just so you can see some of that. And I'll just scroll through. It's very seldom that a whole piece will be found, but these are some. This one I think was reconstructed. Piece of sherd. And this piece I put in here because it's pretty remarkable. This piece is actually comes from Japan. And I did a show. I used to do a lot of galleries with showings with my work. I started doing it that way. And anyway, I got picked up and asked to go to Japan and show my work in one particular gallery. And when I got there, people just, I brought 6 pots with me. They all sold for the first day. But the people just dropped to their knees and squatted down there looking because of the display. And they remember this piece. It was a whole period of time that was called the Homan period. I had no idea what was happening, but the similarity between our pots just shocked everybody. And it was fun to see and experience that. So this is, I'm just going to scroll through some of the places where I get clay and material, a lot along the seashore and the cliffs. There's a clay ponds down in Wellfleet. It's part of the National Seashore, and they've allowed me to take my class and other people in there to get some clay material. After we get it, we have to do some crushing. So we're using a mortar and pestle. Yeah, that's me ages ago in the studio there at the Harvard Studios. And people are sifting it out because there's, there's rocks and other organic material that could be in the clay. So we have to clean it before we can use it. So there's a lot of that. It's a big process making clay bodies. And then we need to test them in the kiln to find out when they would melt. So clay has a melting point. And so you don't want your pot to melt. So we find out through the testing what it can do and how long we can cook it and at what temperature. This is an example of the coils. You're making long coils. And then my technique is a little different than I think others, people that I've watched, like people from the Pueblos. I do roll out the coils, but I then paddle them to be the thickness that I want my piece to be. So when I stack them, they are already close to the thickness I want. So it just takes away a lot of guesswork. And so these are some of my students working on their pieces, paddling, shaping. And there's just a couple of other little tiny pieces that I made. I tossed in at the end of this thing. So there's that. I know I'm going along really quickly. So I would like you to have some time to ask some questions. But before we do that, I'd like to share what I'm doing now. Now I get to use plastic and other things, where I know the ancestors only had probably wet leather pieces to keep their clay in a, it takes quite a while to make a pot. And most clay bodies will not stand up so that you could make the whole piece in one sitting, or 8 hours or so, because it's too soft. The weight of the water and the clay it determines really a lot of things. But so somehow I tried to imagine, that what the clay built, the pot makers were doing back in the day. And the thing that I think they were doing was that they would wrap them or gently put thin, damp leather buckskin that had no hair on it. And I use a piece of buckskin a wet one to smooth also. I call it the leather tongue. And it just sort of licks all the little nudgies out of the piece, right? And then they probably put it in, bury it, or not completely buried it, but put it in a shallow hole just to keep it cooler. Because once too much air will harden it. The direct sunlight will crack it. So I'm just trying to guess how they manage some of the conditions that clay pottery building demands. They definitely need shelter from the wind and the sun, and maybe even the heat. I'm not sure about that. The humidity actually helps slow the drying. So I'm now moving towards just doing commission pieces. So I don't do galleries anymore. There was a lot of stuff. The reason I did the galleries was just so that people would see pottery from the Northeast. I guess I did revive the form, the clay pot form. We hadn't, as far as I could tell, we haven't used these clay pots since around 1710. I found evidence of one family here in Mashpee that still lived in the Wetu and refused to acculturate or assimilate. And so they had the clay pots in their Wetu. Although they did have a wood stove in that Wetu. But in any case, that's the last that I could trace any uses of them. Because people, they traded them for the metal, the copper, and other pots that the Europeans brought. They're easier to transport. They're more durable. Of course, the English and some of the Europeans were using lead, which wasn't a good idea to drink or use lead for anything that was going to hold water or anything else that you would drink. Pewter is not good either, really bad. But they were live and learn, right? So the copper heats up really fast, but I don't know that it's that good for you. But sorry, I'm going down the rabbit hole here. We traded off using these pots, and so the form disappeared. And I really didn't want to see that form disappear completely forever. And so going to the galleries instead of on the powwow grounds. So a lot of us as craftspeople, we display our finest work amongst our people at the powwow. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's kind of risky when you're talking about pottery out there, but a little bump at the table could cost a lot. But I wanted to, I wanted the art form of our ancestors to be respected by the art world. in the fine arts. In fact, my first show was at the Cape Cod Museum of Fine Arts, and they let me show like 15 pots, and so it was wonderful. And a lot of Native people came, filled the room. It was great. It was totally encouraging for me to continue doing this. So after doing that for a while, and I thought that it was established well in the art world that this is an art form, and I started teaching. Found a lot of people, mostly, and a lot of our own people. In the wintertime, I would take students, and sometimes they would do it in Indian education, we called it, the Title IV program. So a lot of our folks have been introduced to it, but it's a certain person, certain types that really take to the clay, and so it's not everybody, and that's okay. That's fine. So what I'm working on right now, I got commissioned for a piece that's going back to Harvard, actually. The Divinity School commissioned a piece for the Schwartz Hall, they call it. It's a building that has been renovated, and this school is, they want an Indigenous presence there. And for a number of years, I have been doing guest lecture series, lecturing in Anne Brody's Indigenous Studies, class or whatever. And, Anne's been a good friend too. And she always invited Native people to come and do their presentations rather than her teaching a class. So I appreciate that about her. And also wanted local people to be represented. So in any case, that particular school is a religious studies, and they respect the spirituality of our folks. And so I agreed to do this commission, and I'm going to show you the piece that I made for that. It wasn't easy because Harvard and Mashpee have a not so great history regarding land and missionaries and all of that. So excuse me while I pick the piece up. I'll try to move slowly so not to give people vertigo. Right? Okay. So this is how it's going to sit in the display. It does have the rounded bottom. So you, I know something happened with me. So I couldn't stand on its own. And normally people would have 3 rocks around 3 or 4, some, whatever amount, but rocks that would hold the pot above the coals, and you could bring the coals close around the pot to control the temperature of whatever you were cooking. So I did not want to make a flat bottom pot just so that it would be easier to display. And then the museum, the school had some issues or concern about the rocks. That if the rocks took a little slide, that the pot would fall over, and all of that. So I came up with this as a solution. I'm making a stand to help it. Yeah, so there. And so you can see the white inlay and the black slip, as we call it. And it's fine, and this is where it's going to go. I think the bear is going to be black, and the other piece on the other side, there's 3 pieces that are holding this. One of them is mixed with, I mixed up some white clay into it on the side. And the back piece is not really going to be seen much, but it has a bunch of stamps on it, like my grandson's stamps, so like petroglyphs. So I'm going to put this back and open for questions.
Oh, thank you, Ramona. I hope everyone can hear me. That was absolutely amazing and beautiful. I have a newfound appreciation for pottery, but in particular, the indigenous pottery. Thank you for sharing that history. Very enriching, and it just makes it come much more alive. So thank you for preserving that through your work. We are going to open up for some questions here in the chat. And if you bear with me, I'm not the techiest person, so, okay, here we go. So some questions and comments coming through. So very beautiful. Thank you for giving of your time to share your work and so much knowledge with us today. It makes my heart so full. And another person is saying, thank you for sharing your story. If anyone does have a question and would like to unmute and ask that question, you may do so at this time, or you can type your question in the chat and I will ask for you. I have a question myself, Ramona.
Sure.
I love the pictures of you gathering the clay. And I heard you mention shale. And the process of it. So I always thought the clay was just part of the dirt. Honestly, I thought there was dirt that was clay, but it's actually the substance shale pounded down. Would you explain a little bit of that?
Right, it's a special vein of earth. You know, there's many layers. The clay is sort of like, it got finely sifted through a lot of motion of the earth itself and compressed as well. The finer, the better. There is such thing as stoneware, which is a little coarser. But it's usually around water bodies because that's where a lot of the shifting took place. And
okay.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. So I wouldn't be able to just go out in any lake or river and dig around and find a clay substance. It's particular. I noticed you were like near the shoreline that looked like the ocean.
Right, that was quite, there's a high cliff there. And yes, we had to rinse out a lot of the salt because if, just from the spray, not from the ocean itself, but there's, when that would fire, if I didn't rinse out the salt, when it fired, it would turn red. Salt fires.
Yeah.
We do crush rocks, though, just to be clear. I call them rotten rocks, and there's a soft rock. You crush those up too and mix them in with the clay. It helps make them durable. And on the bottom of the piece, I use a lot of that durable stuff. Just because it's the part that sits on the rocks, right? So.
Let's see, we do have a question coming through. Ramona, thank you so much for sharing your brilliant work and your knowledge with us. You said at the beginning that when you do this work, the earth is speaking to me through my hands. That's a quote. This is such a powerful teaching, and I wanted to ask if you could tell us all more about how we can learn from the earth, especially at a time when human-induced climate change is taking a drastic toll on the planet. Thank you so much for this presentation today. So.
Yeah, so thank you for that question. There's 2 things I would say about that. Yes, the clay already has it has a creative energy in it. It's a living thing. In fact, in our language, is the word. It's an animate because it's a living thing. The clay is a living thing. And so that when moving it and touching it, it actually has a creative direction. And so the hands are just following along what that direction is. A lot of surprises come out. And I think if you got a piece of clay and you allowed it to offer its direction, it would be surprising what would happen. The earth, I think some of that climatrosity that we're experiencing, in order to feel the earth again, you really almost need to clear away some of the debris around our heads and bodies. Luckily, those of us who are in the coastline, at least in Mashpee, we have a lot of crystal granites, the beach sand. The beach sand, laying on it without the towel will help draw a lot of impurities out of your body and mind. It's an old Indian trick. Get rid of some foolishness so that you can see a little clearer. That's one way to do it. So I'll stop there with that.
Thank you. Thank you for that response. Couple of more coming through. We see a lot of incising and pressed pottery, but not too much painting for design in our traditional pots. In your opinion, why do you think that is? And in your research, have you seen painted pots done traditionally in the Northeast? If so, did they differ in design pattern? So there's 3 questions there.
Right. Yeah, no, there's very little. I have a piece that was found that has, again, just the black and the red ochre. But its design is very simple. The painting is very simple. And I know it could be, we all know it could be very elaborate, but they're not. They're very minimalist sort of, and I don't know why that is. I do know that we were not a material culture, and so even though the pots were actually like members of the family, so that's where everybody came to get their food from. So it had a very special place in our family unit. And you'd think, and so the carving and the incising and all of that is particular to that family, I presume, back in the day. But I don't know why painting was not, I mean, it came in much later in history where we painted on leather and We did use color in our mats, interior mats, like beautiful patterns, and we did dye fibers to make rope and sashes and things like that. So, but I don't know why painting was not one of our things.
And another viewer writes, I was interested in hearing about the story that you carved into one of the pieces you showed in the slideshow presentation. So if there's time, she'd love to hear the story. It's about 12:45, and we have about 10 more minutes for questions.
Okay. Well, I guess I failed to mention that the body of the pots is considered female, and the top of the pot is considered male. The bottom of the pot is where the nutrients, the minerals, and all the elements that go into the pot, the heat and everything, water, merge together and make medicine for us to eat, right? So that's like mom, or that's the female offering to the family unit. But on the top, where notice that there's generally 4 points on the piece, and those 4 points represent the 4 directions that men would go to search for food and knowledge, wisdom, and they bring it back to the community and offer it also to help nourish us all. So those are the basic design and shape elements of these pots. So on the top, they're, as far as the tattoos and the glyphs on the incising, generally they're lines on the top. They're just straight lines or geometrical type things. That's more male than female. And then the bottom of the females, generally, it's the small circles, dots, wavy lines, not a lot, it's just understated, but it's there. And the paddle prints is really where a lot of that is, and the durability is important. So yeah, there's a lot to think about when you're making them, but also what you're representing.
And so we do have another question. So wonderful to see your beautiful work. I loved seeing your tools too. And so did I. I'm going to tag on to that person's comment there. It was amazing. Could you speak more about temper you use and how that helps the process?
Right. Well, traditionally we used a lot of shell as a temper for the range. And so that would be, mussel, oyster, not so much quahog, but yeah, mussel, oyster, and clam shells. And there's no crab or lobster. They just don't work in the clay. But that's the temper that I use. I'm going to try it. So these are, of course, you recognize they're ice cream sticks, but I carved both ends of them so that to leave different impressions. Yeah. We get really busy. Oh, here's the little hand.
So I have a question. What would you say to someone like myself who has difficulty drawing? I tried making a pot and coming up with, the pattern, but also I cannot draw. I've tried, I get so discouraged. But so what what advice would you give to someone who maybe would love to work with this in that way, but just doesn't have the ability to draw?
Yeah, I think you should have some stamps.
Oh,
Yeah, yeah. If you had some of these, you can make wonderful impressions. Beautiful patterns is endless. Just touching, all the way around, or
Mhm.
dragging along. That takes away. It's very seldom that I do freehand drawing on the spots. Even when I was talking about this bone one, I might start drawing a line and then I'll go, why not? Instead of draw the line, just roll the line, And so it's really, so that's my answer, Crystal. Get some stamps, make some, or have someone make some for you.
that sounds like a good idea. I'm encouraged to give it one more try. I'm trying to find my niche in the art world. Are there any other questions or comments from anyone else? Well, Ramona, this was just wonderful. I really am, I just am really, really touched by everything that you said. Just make sure I didn't miss anyone.
Well,
Thanking you for the event. It was inspiring and healing. So I want to say thank you again, indeed, for preserving such a rich history and for sharing that. And you really are a very gifted artist. Indeed, I love the part that you just made that you showed us. But when you got up to move, we saw from the picture, you said you had the one in the background that was in the corner. And so now I could gain the appreciation for the actual size of that pot. In the pictures, they look small, but you're really doing amazing work. So thank you for that. And I want to say thank you also to you, the viewers who've joined us today. Obviously, we can't have successful presentations without an audience as well. So thank you. I would like to make this notice to put this in your mind. So we would like to also recognize that Ramona Peters is this year's Lifetime Achievement Awardee for Tamaquag's annual honoring. So thank you for that, and congratulations for that. She is being recognized for her outstanding lifetime of work, empowering the Native community through advocacy, historic preservation, environmental justice, and art. So you can join us for this year's honoring. Learn more and purchase your tickets on our website. I'd also like to invite you all back for next month's Culture Bearer presenter. Those details will also be on our website. We are working on that presentation for September. And if you're interested in more cultural programming, Tamaquag offers a large variety of tours, visiting museum educator services, virtual presentations, workshops, professional development, and more. You can learn more on our website, give a call, or send an email to discuss options. And this presentation today, along with many others, will be available on our YouTube page. So be sure to circle back and share this with your family and friends. And once again, we'd like to thank our funders at the Rhode Island State Council on the Arts, Rhode Island Council for the Humanities, Rhode Island Charge, the Pepito Opportunity Connection, the New England Foundation for the Arts, and other generous funders and donors like you. Please consider making a tax-deductible donation to the Tamaquag Museum. You can also support local Indigenous artists by shopping and sharing our online store, a branch of our program for Indigenous empowerment. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. Thank you again, Ramona, for being with us. And we hope to see you all again next month. Wani Kisak. Have a good afternoon.